I am currently accepting applications for security detail when I make a trip to St. Catharines this week to watch the Kitchener Rangers and Niagara Ice Dogs. And we may have received the most random email ever to the OHL podcast as we welcome you aboard for another week. My name is Mike Farwell. The man over there is Dan Mahar. Please remember, while you're here, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. Make sure you get every episode downloaded automatically to your phone or the notification when a new episode is posted. And you'll find Dan at his name on X, Dan Mahar. I am at Farwell_OHL. And that email, the randomness of it, whatever email you want to send, you can do so. ohlpodcast@rogers.com. Dan, as we get underway for another week here on the show, quick one for you. Are we ready to write off the Erie Otters and Sarnia Sting in the Western Conference? Is it just an 8-team race now, figuring out who gets 6, 7, 8, 7 points back? I don't know. I'm starting to think it's too big a hill to climb for either the Otters or the Sting.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but yes. Yeah, I'm writing them off. I mean, it's yeah, you're looking at 7, 8 points. That starts to look a lot bigger this time of year, and I just don't know that either of those teams have it in them to make up that ground, because it's not like the teams they're chasing are complete slouches and are going to drop a bunch either. So yeah, I think it's time to start looking at the draft for those two.
Yeah, as much as Guelph and Owen Sound have been struggling in the West, I just think that gap is too big. I know we're just under a third of the season still to play, but it seems a little bit insurmountable at this point. On the note of the security detail I'm looking for, Dan, it is the Brotherhood of the Traveling Hat, as you well know, the Sudbury Wolves green hat picked up as a game day giveaway in Sudbury a few weeks back. And I've been taking it with me to the places that I go on the broadcast circuit. And Steve Clark over in Niagara has already warned me that he's got his eyes on this hat. If I bring it to St. Catharines, if it's at the Meridian Center this weekend, Steve Clark is coming for it. I don't know how to respond to this. Like, what am I supposed to do? The hat has to travel before it gets to its ultimate destination in Kingston, and I can hand it off to the guy who asked for it, Alan Etmansky. But I don't know. Like, what do I do? I guess I could ask my broadcast partner, Josh Piercy, to run some cover for me. I don't know what to do.
Well, I think Steve might have the size advantage on you, probably both. So it depends what side Brandon Caputo's on, because if he's on your side, you're good. If he's with Steve, you're in trouble.
B, come on. Farwell needs a little bit of help. And let's be honest, Dan, everybody has the size advantage on me.
That's true. That's true.
Something I was thinking about, though, and I want to get your opinion on this, Dansky. Even before I am in St. Catharines for Ice Dogs Rangers on Saturday, I am in London at Canada Life Place for Rangers Knights on Wednesday. What do you think the chances are of former Sudbury Wolf Dale Hunter, whose banner hangs at the Sudbury Arena, taking the hat and posing for a photo? Maybe not even putting it on, just hold. Do you think Dale Hunter will hold the traveling hat and pose for a photo?
I think the odds of him taking the hat are very high. The odds of you getting it back, not that high. So I would not. I would not bring it.
And if I'm worried about Steve Clark, forget about it. If Dale Hunter gets his hands on the hat and he says it's now his, it's never making it to Kingston, is it?
Never. Not a chance.
I know this has happened before, Dan. I know that Sam O'Reilly and Jared Woolley are not the first players to be experiencing what O'Reilly and Woolley are going to experience this week. I don't know if it's just the age and stage of life I've gotten to where this is hitting me harder, but it's been on my mind since the trade deadline, quite frankly. The adjustments that these young men make, whomever they are, when they get traded from one OHL team to another, it cannot be easy. In the case of O'Reilly and Woolley, they go to an arch rival in Kitchener, and they still have to make that one last visit back to the place where they won back-to-back OHL championships. The teammates that they won it with, I know so many have graduated, etc., but this has got to be a really weird week for O'Reilly and Woolley, no?
Oh, talk about the gamut of emotions, right? Like everything, just the time they had in London where, the push and pull. I mean, for me, probably the trickiest thing is if you think about it, that London Knights organization, that culture, you're all in, right? You bleed green. You won the Memorial Cup there, so you can't just flick your allegiances like a light switch, right? Like I'm sure these players are professional and they've done terrific work for the Kitchener Rangers so far, but you have to still feel, we're part of this. These are kind of my boys, right? And then not just that, but all the off ice relationships you make, the school you were in, all those things play in, and it's got to be a weird week. But I just this week I heard a podcast with Matthew Barnaby on it, and former Rangers assistant coach and NHL. What will we call him? Pugilist, antagonizer.
Pest, yes, absolutely.
Well, and he joked about how he got traded 8 times, and he kind of was, putting it on himself. But he talked about the junior trades, and he said in one case they just told him, he was living in one small town in Quebec. The next day they said, you go find an apartment in Montreal. You're moving there. You play for Verdun, and then another franchise asked him if he wanted to be traded or not, and he said to the owners, totally up to you. I'll do whatever's best for the franchise. Next day he was traded. And so he kind of took it all in stride and was kind of regaling the podcast with stories of these moves and what it meant for a teenager. And he didn't have much support and, didn't have parents around or friends around, was just constantly getting kicked from city to city. And he seemed to take it all in stride. Said, yeah, new opportunity. That's fine. But I'm sure for some of these kids, it's not that easy. It's a lot of mixed emotions, and we'll see how it is for O'Reilly and Willie on Wednesday. But it's going to be a weird night for them, I'm sure.
And to Mark Hunter's credit, in London, the general manager there, and I know he's not alone in having done this, but he really did send the players that he traded away to very good situations. Ben Wilmot having a time in Barrie with a very good Colts team, and of course O'Reilly and Woolley with a team in Kitchener that, since their addition, along with others that the Rangers have made, are absolutely in the conversation. These two guys might be able to make it back to back to back OHL championships with the team that they have landed on in Kitchener. So credit to Mark Hunter. Again, I know other GMs have done this and they always try to look for these good fits in these right situations, but he's really given them a chance to do something special and end up in a situation. And I know it's not like it was all just magnanimous on the part of the London Knights. They got good return on those trades, especially all the draft picks and Jacob Zoo and the rights to Barch from Kitchener, etc. But he did put these guys in good situations. Mark Hunter did.
He did, and that's the beauty of being traded from a team when they're selling, right? Your odds are you're going to a team that is in the go for it now mode. So odds are you're going to go to a team with somewhat of a chance. And I think that's the mentality you have to take if you're O'Reilly and Woolley too. If you look at it, you say, what have they got left to win, right? They just won a Memorial Cup, and you look at, but this is an opportunity for them to say, yeah, we were part of this London Knights organization that won, but a lot of people will say, well, yeah, they had Cowan and Barkey and Dickinson, and it was the Knights and Hunters. Well, here's your chance to prove that it was you two gentlemen who are a big part of forming that winner. And if you can go the next year and do it with another team down the road, that really speaks loudly to you and what you brought to the table. So I think that's the mentality they have to have, and just say, we're moving on. Here's a great opportunity for us to show how big a part of this we are.
Something occurred to me this week, Dan, that I wanted to get your perspective on. And it occurred to me when I was looking at the race for the scoring lead in the Ontario Hockey League. And forgive me, because this now comes with a sidebar. So allow me a moment to set this up and get the sidebar out of the way, and then get your perspective on this. So what occurred to me is this: looking at the OHL scoring race, it's pretty tight. Lots of names still in the mix, with Nathan Aspinall leading the way. But it struck me that Aspinall, even though he's leading the way, and then of course you look at the others who are in the mix, none of these players are on pace for a 100-point season. And I thought, that seems like, when do you think the last time that happened was? So I started taking a look. And then this is where the sidebar comes in. Please, Ontario Hockey League, can you do something about your damn website? Can you take it back to what it used to be? Because your website currently sucks. And I'm not just saying this because I got burned by the website when I was looking back at the last time there was not a 100-point scorer in the OHL. But I've heard this from colleagues since the website change. You might remember this a couple of years ago with the app that everybody was enjoying until they tried to meld it with the CHL app, and then it just became a mess. I hardly use the app anymore because it turned me right off. I've had colleagues say, "Hey, Farwell, can you get the league to do something about the OHL's website?" As if I've got that kind of power. But if I do, hey, OHL, do something about your damn website because it sucks, especially on mobile. It's terrible. You can't look back at stuff the way you used to be able to look back at stuff. It's far too clunky now. And I think my colleagues just asked me to investigate this, not because I can get something done, but because I'm likely I'm the most likely one to complain about it. So there you go. Complaint registered. OHL, please do something about the website. Because when I looked back on when the last time was that there was not a 100-point scorer in the Ontario Hockey League, I got back to 1998-99. And think about this. I'm going back year by year through the OHL's website, which goes back to 97-98. And every year just pull up, leading scorers. And it's just showing me sequentially from top to bottom. But for whatever reason, 98-99, when you pull that up, the leading scorers are all out of order. And I should have known. So this is on me. But in my Fridays with Farwell video on the OHL podcast YouTube channel, you'll see me say you'll hear me say in 98-99, it was Ryan Jardine who won the scoring race over Corey Pecker with 61 points. Jardine had to Pecker's 59 in 68 games. That should have been my tip-off. What the site does for whatever reason that year is it doesn't put the scorers up in order. You have to reorder them. Every other year, they just came up in order. This year, but I should have known. 61 points in 68 games, that's never going to win a scoring title. So that's still on me, but OHL, please fix your website. So thanks to Luis, who posted on the OHL podcast YouTube channel, said, I don't know where you got your stats, Farwell, but here's what I see. And so I went back and checked Luis's stats. Luis had Wayne Maxter's 94 points as the last player, Maxner, a former Niagara Falls Flyer, last player to not get 100 points. I had Gary Dineen with the Toronto Neil McNeil Maroons that same year, 1963, with 95 points. So again, this can come back to the OHL. I know we're going back to OHA days here, but just can't you do a better job with the website? People might be interested in this information. Whether it was Maxner's 94 or Gary Dineen's 95, the bottom line is this, Dan, and thanks again to Luis for pointing this out, because I did make a mistake and it's on me. But 1963, Dan, is the last time the Ontario Hockey League or the Ontario Hockey Association had a player finish a season and win a scoring title with less than 100 points. It could happen again this year for the first time in more than 60 years. So OHL, please fix your website. That's enough from me. Dan, what do you make of the fact that we might not see a 100-point player in the OHL this year?
Well, that's quite a takeaway, right? Because 1963, if you think about it, that's the year the Kitchener Rangers came into the league. So in the entire tenure of the Kitchener Rangers, there's not been a year where the top scorer had less than 100 points. That's pretty long legacy, and I'm not ready to write it off yet this year. I mean, there's enough games left. Someone could go on a heater and hit that 100, especially when you get late in the season. Garbage time. We've seen some players roll up some numbers when they need to hit a mark. Having said that, it's a hard takeaway, right? Like I don't know what to make of that. Is it the NCAA effect where some of the really high-end guys like the Michael Misas, the Porter Martones moved on? That's a factor for sure. Is it just one of those years where there's no superpower in the league? There's no absolute powerhouse team that's, I mean, you could say the Brantford Bulldogs, but they're so deep that it's not like one line's getting all the ice time there. So, I mean, there's a number of factors. You've had injuries. I mean, we've seen those Bulldogs I just referenced have had a few guys out for a window of time. So, I mean, in my head, I'm thinking of numerous reasons why it might come about that we don't have a 100-point scorer, but maybe it's just a rare year where there just isn't that elite dynamic player for whatever reason, or just there isn't that. Maybe it's just not that team that gets beat up on all the time too, where players can pad stats again. So I don't know, Mike. There's a few reasons. I'm not sure what to pin it on though.
Yeah, and I've been looking for the answer to this too, Dan, and I'm not sure that I have one. One of the first things I thought of is, okay, well, what about the top scorers? And if they were away at the World Juniors, how much did that impact? But that certainly wouldn't be unique to this year. Injuries are not unique to this year. One of the other stats I would have loved to pull, and I'll just confess, I had zero time or patience to even try to go through this, but year over year, total goals scored, total, league wide, are they down this year? But again, that would make it an absolute anomaly because the whole idea of defense wins championships. And if you want to look back to the infamous evolution of the trap, the left wing lock. That's Jacques Lemaire, New Jersey Devils back in the mid 1990s, and OHL teams have kind of taken on that approach in so many ways, playing a defense trap kind of style, and yet for all of these decades, 30 years since that came along, players are still putting up 100 points and then some. You mentioned Misa, 130 plus last year to win the OHL scoring title. So it is weird, but I think, look, it's something worth watching down the stretch because you hit it, Dan. Somebody could still go on a heater, right? Aspinall had a 5-point weekend. They could pick up points in later games of the season to get to that 100-point mark, whatever the case may be. But I think as fans of this league, it's definitely worth watching now to see, will any of these guys finish at the century mark? And if they don't, first time in more than 60 years, it has not happened in the OHL.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just use the opportunity to give one little plug out to just a hunch of mine, something I've been feeling watching this year, and I could be way off base, but just to my eye, it feels like the goaltending's as good as it's ever been this year. And I mean, you can go down the list, right? Federal, Frebeck, George, Leenders, Kirsch, Costanzo, like you name it. A lot of these teams seem to have really high-end starters, and it feels to me like after a swoon for a lot of years through the O that we're having some really good goaltending this year. So maybe that's anomalous too. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like it's a good time to give a plug to the goalies, is it not?
I think that's a fantastic point. And you just listed off a whole bunch of them who are terrific. So listen, if you've got a theory as to why, or maybe you know the answer and Dan and I, it's staring us right in the face and we can't come up with it, whatever you think it is, by all means, connect with us. Email is ohlpodcast@rogers.com. As mentioned, you'll find Dan on X at his name, Dan Mahar. I'm on X at Farwell_OHL. Do like Luis did and leave a comment on our YouTube channel, whatever it is, because it's just rather interesting to think that in more than 60 years, we have not had an OHL season finish without a 100-point scorer. And we could, still 20 plus games to play, but we might finish this year without that 20 or that 100-point scorer. Interesting times. Something for us to watch down the stretch. Dan and I watch every team every week so we can bring you our weekly wraparound, which is a glimpse into every market. And the email inbox is always providing fodder for us, this time in the most random of ways. That's still to come too. So stay with us on this week's episode of the OHL Podcast. Super Bowl 60 deserves a sports book built for the moment. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 60, puts you right in the center of the biggest game of the year. Anything can happen during the Super Bowl, and DraftKings has your back with early exit. If your player goes down in the first half, you still get paid in cash when your bet settles. No bonus bets, no waiting. While other sportsbooks don't offer injury protection, DraftKings covers the entire first half, yes, even the second quarter. And early exit works on live bets too. Pre-game or in-game, DraftKings has you covered. New to DraftKings? New customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Each and every week on this podcast, Dan and I are keeping our eyes on every market in the league, and we bring you information from every one of those markets in our weekly wraparound. Remember, we go alphabetically, so we're not trying to snub Windsor or Sudbury. They just happen to be at the end of the alphabet in the Western and Eastern conferences. So we'll get to them, but we just go alphabetically from the top. And Dan, you're on Western Conference duty this week. So why don't you start us off with the Erie Otters.
Sure thing. And Mike, this is and I like this time of year because after the dust settles after the trade deadline, you start to look at players who take advantage of the opportunity. And as a 2009 born player, I love what we're seeing from Tyler Cooper recently, second round pick of the Erie Otters. You look at his point totals, it's 9 through 42 games. You think, well, he's had a little bit of a slow start in the OHL, as to be expected. But 5 of those 9 points have come in the last 10 games. So Tyler Cooper's starting to get opportunity and starting to take advantage of it. So look for him down the road in Erie.
And for fans of the Otters there, you mentioned the youth movement, the age of Tyler Cooper. This is one of the guys that, look, we saw Dave Brown basically start all over again with the roster this year. So these are the players. Cooper will be one of these players moving forward that is part of the next run for the Erie Otters should they get there.
Absolutely.
All right, I'll start the East in Barrie. And how about this for the Colts? They remain perfect in Flint. Since the Firebirds came into the league in 2015, Barrie has never lost a game at the Dort Financial Center, and they kept that run alive this past weekend, even though they were trailing 5-3 midway through the third period. They came back for a 6-5 overtime win. Ben Wilmot, we mentioned him already in that trade with London, in on every one of those comeback goals, scoring once and adding 2 assists. So the Barrie Colts come from behind to preserve their perfect record in Flint. They've never lost at the Dort. And a quick other note, keep your eyes on Kayshawn Aitchison down the stretch. He picked up a couple of assists this past weekend. He is now just 11 points back of Brant Clark's record for most points by a Barrie defenseman. Aitchison has 19 games left to get those 11 points. So along with the 100-point player in the league, let's keep our eyes on Kayshawn Aitchison and 11 more points in 19 games to set a new record.
Well, Mike, we don't talk ahead of doing these things, but I feel like you're always giving me great segues because as I move to Flint, I wanted to reference that game. And, there's a tale of two sides, right? A great comeback win for Barrie, but on the other side, what's going to burn the coach's britches is a 5-3 lead with under 8 minutes to go. Not only did you give up the lead, but the tying goal came short-handed from Barrie with under 3 minutes to go. So that just, that's something that a coaching staff's going to say just absolutely can't happen. But then you look for the response. And in the next game versus Sarnia, Kevin He throws up 4 points to get the win over the Sting. So it's about how you respond to those times, and the Flint Firebirds did it this weekend.
Did you just shortchange Kevin He a point? I think he had 5 in that game then.
You know what?
Season high.
My counting skills end at about 3 or 4, so it's quite possible.
Dan, you got the thumb. Don't forget to use the thumb. 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yeah. Sorry, Kevin.
Great point. Great point. All right. Speaking of close but no cigar, how about Zach Bowen in Brampton as I look at the Steelheads next? And listen, not taking anything away, what a weekend he had. 52 saves on 54 shots in back-to-back starts. So that's 120 minutes of hockey, back-to-back starts. And Bowen had a shutout run of 118 minutes and 36 seconds of those 120 minutes. He was playing shutout hockey because he allowed 1 goal in each game. In Guelph, the goal comes with 1:19 to play. And then the next night in Oshawa, the goal comes with 5 seconds to play. So the guy, he's got 2 regular season and 1 playoff career shutout. He was on the brink of 2 more. 1:19 away one night, 5 seconds away the next night. But what a weekend, back-to-back starts for Zach Bowen, second star in both games.
Hey, guys, play to the buzzer. Play to the buzzer.
Exactly. Poor Zach Bowen. You owe the guy. Come on, you steelhead.
I know. I used to hate that in my team. Guys kind of mail it in with 8 seconds to go. Think about the goalie. You referenced those Guelph Storm again in that little hit there. And I just wanted to talk about the rigors of this league and how hard it is. So you take a player of terrific pedigree like Jacko Wysick, who's going to be a terrific player in this league. And, you get to the middle part of the season, you always hit those runs where things are not going well, and just 3 assists in his past 10 for such a highly touted player. And you look at his month of December, -12 in the month of December for Wysick. So kids, keep your head up. This happens to all young players in this league, and I bet you my last dollar that this kid's going to put up a ton of points before he leaves this league. But it's not an easy league, and just a reminder.
That's a really good point, and he will. You're absolutely right. Wysick put up those points in the future, but 68 games is an absolute grind, no question about it. All right, in Brantford next for me, a few Bulldogs notes, starting with Ryder Bolton and his 6-game suspension. Now, Bolton had just returned from a 4-game suspension for a blindside hit, and his 3rd game back, he picks up a 6-game suspension for abuse of an official. Also want to give a quick shout out to Charlie Paquette. When I was mentioning 300 game milestones last week, we had Alex Ferran, Brad Gardner, Ethan Miedema, Sebastian Gervais reaching that mark this season. Paquette has also gotten there. And listen, talk about an immediate impact in Brantford since being acquired from the Guelph Storm. 13 points in his first 10 games as a Bulldog. And I also want to make mention of Merrick Van Acker. Another race to watch, of course, is the goal scoring race, not just points, but Van Acker leading the way in that department. And should Van Acker finish the season with the most goals in the OHL, he'll become the 2nd Brantford Bulldog in a row to do that. Nick Lardis, of course, 71, did it last year. And interestingly, Lardis, a Blackhawks prospect. Van Acker, a Blackhawks prospect. And who's behind Van Acker, 2nd in goals scored this year in the OHL? Jack Pridham, a Blackhawks prospect. You're doing something right there, Chicago, because you got leading goal scorers in the OHL in your roster.
Pay that OHL scout more.
That's right.
So Jack Pridham's team in Kitchener. So, it's rare to get a Gordie Howe hat trick. It is extra rare to get 2 of them. And, Kitchener had 2 Gordie Howe hat tricks against Windsor this week. Exactly who you'd expect, right? Matthew Hilachar and what checks notes. Dylan Edwards and Carson Campbell are the 2 that got Gordie Howe hat tricks. And OHL, can you go back and check the tape and find a way that a puck glanced off Cameron Reed to the goal scorer, because he would have been the 3rd Gordie Howe hat trick in that game. He already had the fight in the goal, the 2 toughest pieces. He just lacked the assist, or we would have had 3 Gordie Howe hat tricks in one game for the Kitchener Rangers. A little bit of an anomaly.
I know that the league would not want to keep such stats, but I was desperately trying to find a way to look it up, Dan, because likely it's happened at some point in some league somewhere, but 2 Gordie Howe hat tricks in one game, eh?
And so close to 3. So close to 3.
All right, next stop for me is the limestone city of Kingston. And it took him until his 8th game as a Front, but Alex Misiak picked up his first goal at the right time in Kingston. It was the game winner as the Fronts won their 8th in a row at home. Now, you might remember last season, Kingston established a new mark of 16 consecutive wins at Slush Puppy Place. They're now halfway there thanks to Misiak's game-winning goal, his first as a Front.
Right on time. Last week in my wraparound and checked how he hadn't got a goal yet. So there you go.
Yeah, that was the OHL podcast bump. You call him out, boom. Watch
Exactly.
this, Dan Mahar. I'm not just scoring, I'm scoring the game winner.
Like clockwork, right? So moving to London, Mike, and I'm seeing the writing on the wall. It's looking a lot like a London Sioux first round. How great would that be? All kinds of intrigue there. But look at the trade deadline. So London sold, right? Well, yeah, but they also brought in Ryan Brown from the Sarnia Sting, and 14 points through his first 13 games with London, including 8 of those coming as goals. So a little bit of a bump for him, changing scenery as a 2007 born player looking to right his career and doing A-okay so far in London.
Have you been on the phone recently with your buddy Kyle Raftis up there in the studio, just out of curiosity, Dan? Because I remember we all watched Brady Martin get injured at the World Juniors, and I remember Kyle Raftis saying it's not serious. Anybody seen Brady Martin lately? Out of curiosity, it's been a while.
It has been
a while.
Yeah.
But Sue's still going great guns, so there's that.
Yes.
All right, next up for me, Niagara and trade deadline pickup Jakub Kromiak has reached an OHL scoring milestone. He has now passed 100 points for his OHL career, and he's putting up almost a point per game with the Ice Dogs after being a 0.6 points per game player with the Kitchener Rangers. So, and I know you mentioned this just last week too, Dan. A lot of people said, ooh, a second and a third for Jakub Kromiak, an overager that the Rangers had to move, maybe an overpay on Niagara's part. This guy is paying dividends in a big way, in my opinion. Now he's passed 100 points in his OHL career.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of how sometimes GMs know a little more about how things work behind the scenes than the casual viewer sometimes. So give him some
everybody's an armchair GM, Dan, but you're right. Only 20 guys get paid the money to be a GM in the league.
Yes, yeah. So moving to Owen Sound, Mike, I looked things up and thought, what's going on with my buddy Pierce Bowie? He, 3 goals on January 2nd and 3rd in 2 games. Then went the month of January with nada. No goals the rest of the month, just 3 assists. Thought, is it the pressure of draft year or whatnot? But then January 31st hit and 2 goals and assist in his game. So maybe he just didn't like January. Nobody did. The weather was garbage. Pierce Bowie back on track as we head into February.
In 1,000 days of January, Pierce Bowie couldn't find it, right? I'll tell you. I'm with you, Dan. Glad it is finally February.
Yes.
All right, for North Bay, I'm going to take us into it's not the way back playback, but we're going to go back in history a little bit here to the 2024 playoffs. I'm sure Battalion fans are going to remember that very well. It was the 3rd straight trip to the Eastern Conference Final for North Bay. And I know Battalion fans, you're like, yeah, but we lost. I know you did. And in 7 games, just like you did the year before. But hey, it's a hell of a run, 3 straight years to the Eastern Conference Final. And in that 3rd year, 2024, Sandis Vilmanis had himself a playoff. 27 points in 16 games, that playoff for North Bay. And last week, the Battalion grad scored his first NHL goal for the Florida Panthers in his 9th NHL game. So Sandis Vilmanis, I'm sure, remembered fondly in North Bay. Now he's on the NHL goal scorers list as well.
Attaboy, Sandis. All right, in Saginaw, Mike, you referenced the race for 6, 7, 8 in the West, who we think is pretty solidified now. We don't think any of those teams are going to fall and likely not going to move up either. So it's between Guelph, Owen Sound, and Saginaw for those 6, 7, 8 slots, likely shaping up to play either Kitchener, Flint, or Windsor. So for the Saginaw Spirit fans, I just did a quick check and said, well, who would you prefer to play? And,
I know.
You know?
I'm going to guess you're going to say the Windsor Spitfires, Dan.
Well, ding, ding, ding. And you know what? And a great guess. And I just looked in 12 games against those teams head to head, Saginaw Spirit have only won 2, but both those coming against the Spits. Does that mean they want the Spits? Does that mean they'll beat the Spits in the playoffs? Very different thing. But I'm thinking as it lines up, maybe they won't hate playing the Spits.
And that just speaks to the Western Conference. We mentioned it earlier. Looks like next year for Erie and Sarnia. And then it looks like you already made mention of London Sioux. That's going to be the 4-5 matchup, right? So 6, 7, 8 up for grabs. But really, we're coming down when we start watching things through the final third of this OHL season. Is there going to be a 100-point player? Is Van Acker going to be the back-to-back Chicago Blackhawks and Brantford Bulldogs prospects, Blackhawks, Bulldogs players to have the most goals in the league? And really, we can start watching how it's going to line up for the Western Conference playoffs, because it very much looks like it's going to be Sioux and London locked in where they are, and the top 3 might shimmy a little bit, and the bottom 3 might shimmy a little bit. So
yeah, and it's so close you probably won't get to pick who it is, because you think you're aiming for 7th slot, and then the team that you thought was going to be in 2nd slips to 3rd. So it's going to come right down to the end.
There you go. That's what we're doing here on the OHL podcast. We're giving you the intrigue, the things to watch down the stretch here. All right, in Oshawa, if you had made an in-game bet, listen, never bet more than you can afford to lose. Bet responsibly. But just imagine if you had made the in-game bet on the Gens Ice Dogs game last weekend when Niagara was up 4-2 going to the 3rd. You would have made a fortune picking the Gens to come back in that one, because they put up a season-high 4 goals in the 3rd period, right? The season-high in any period to come back from that 4-2 deficit and win it 6-4. The 6 goals scored by Oshawa in that game, winning it 6-4, also ties their second most for goals scored in any game this season. And on a team, Dan, that I know you've mentioned this before, that does not have a single plus player in the plus-minus category. A few guys even, but no plus players. Lucas Moore was a +5 in that game for the Gens. So there you go.
And, I don't know if the historians of the OHL podcast will remember a game earlier pre-Christmas where the very same Lucas Moore was a -5. So he just made up for it in one shot.
There you go.
Good on you, Lucas. All right, moving to Sarnia, Mike. Sometimes we hear some commentary from our Sarnia fans. God bless you. You guys are. How can you find positives about this team? It's been terrible. Stop saying positive things. Well, we're here as a beacon of light for Sting fans. We want to shed some positivity in a tough year. And I want to point to Brenner Lamons, a 4th overall pick that was taking some heat for, wow, how was he picked 4th overall? There's not a lot of production. Well, he's a big body, physical, plays with an edge. You've got all those things. And a goal and assist this week in a win over Saginaw, and then a goal and assist again in a loss to Flint. So 4 points in 2 games for your big high pick, and he's just starting to find his game. So the future looks bright for Mr. Lamons.
All right. The future is already bright. The present is very bright in Ottawa, where I am stopping next. And hey, a healthy Sam McHugh is a dangerous Sam McHugh. He missed 13 games with an upper body injury, but 7 points in his first 6 games back from that injury. 3 of those 7 points were goals, and one of those goals, the lacrosse style Michigan in a win over Peterborough. So Sam McHugh, an acquisition from the Brantford Bulldogs earlier this season, healthy and scoring in highlight reel fashion for the Ottawa 67s.
Yeah, and Sam McHugh's a great example, Mike, of sometimes when players have injuries or nagging things, even when they're playing, they're not quite 100%. And you knew that guy's too good to hold down for too long, so he's starting to go.
Great point.
So, Sue, you mentioned it a little earlier. What's going on with Brady Martin? We're still hearing the injury report saying week to week, which, doesn't sound terrific. And we're starting to hear some rumblings. Do they just kind of hold him out till close to the playoffs? They're going okay. They, like you said, they're kind of locked 4 or 5 slot. They'd really like home ice. They're going okay. Just got Justin Cloutier back, who has 2 goals in his first 5 games. And, for little levity, I think the Toronto Blue Jays are inquiring about the availability of Spencer Evans, who got a 3-game suspension for slashing. And you don't often see multi-games for slashing, but he had a heck of a swing on that one. Plays with a bit of an edge. Great stay-at-home guy with an edge for Sue, but they're going to play without him and Brady Martin for the next couple.
Funny you should mention a suspension, Dan, because as much as I, too, want to be that beacon of light here, positivity on the OHL podcast, we got to look, when I'm looking at Peterborough next on the wraparound, we got to look at Adam Levac here. And his suspension is currently indefinite. I don't know how many games will be assessed, but it was kind of on the ugly side. I'm sure Adam Levac has much regret at this point, but a slew foot is one thing. A slew foot, the way Levac slew footed Caleb Deitch, of the Ottawa 67s, is a different story entirely. There was a bit of a melee, and Deitch and Levac were kind of wrapped up together doing the whole hug and dance thing. But then Levac swept the feet out and got in a few punches with Deitch down on the ice. Not a great look before the officials could get there and break it up. So Adam Levac suspended this past week, and not the best look on that one for young Mr. Levac.
No, and I would just add, Mike, this is exactly why the referees in this league, I think, wanted the 4-minute slew foot added this year, and we saw it called in the Kitchener-Windsor game this year. So the Levac one is a classic example of the 5-minute major plus suspension. That was a vicious slew foot. You don't want to ever see those, but they are not all created the same. Kind of the incidental, accidental one's no injury, not vicious. You needed a different option for the officials. So just wanted to point that out. But yeah, not a good look. So ending in Windsor, Mike, couple things. The Windsor Spitfires have had a little bit of an issue with discipline lately. They are league high in penalty minutes in this weekend, leading the race to hit 700 PIMs this year in the league. Got to stay out of the box a little bit more. It cost them on Friday against Kitchener again. But I did want to point out the good work when the Windsor Spitfires picked up Jakob Fibiger. Some of the commentary was, well, who's losing minutes? Who's doing what? Well, when you have Anthony Cristoforo, you just throw him up on forward, right? And he doesn't miss a beat, still running about a point a game. So a great season for him. Love to see the versatility of a veteran player like that. And a touch of illness going through that Spitfire dressing room on the weekend too. So maybe not time to panic about a loss in a big game. I'm not sure they were all quite 100% for that one.
I'm glad you mentioned Fibiger, Dan, because I couldn't help but think of you when I was watching the Spitfires play the Rangers on the weekend. And you had identified Fibiger on a couple of occasions earlier this season, still with Brampton, saying, hey, here's a guy that's worth the price of admission. And you just liked the way he played, even for a team that wasn't having a ton of success. And man, was he just a beast. I know Windsor was on the wrong end of a lopsided score, but it didn't seem to me like Fibiger left the ice. And when he was out there, gosh, what a force he is. A lot of fun to watch that guy play.
Yeah, he is so good, eh? And you really, like you said, I'm glad you watched him, because he's a guy you really have to watch almost in isolation. Watch where he's going on the ice away from the puck. Watch what he's doing. Just so good in all 3 zones. Just love his game.
To the nickel city of Sudbury for me as I wrap up the wraparound in the East, and a little bit of relief for goaltender Bjorn Brones, who had to carry the load Well, his crease mate, Paulo Frasca, was out with injury for almost 3 weeks, but Frasca returned as the Wolves are trying to hang on to that final playoff spot in the East. Now, you and I have already decided, Dan, that it's probably too long a shot for Erie and Sarnia in the West. So those top 8 are pretty much set. But in the East, it's going to come down to the wire, and it's a really close race as the Wolves are trying to hang on against those Brampton Steelheads. So at least they have their 2 regulars, if you will, back in Frasca and Bronis in the crease.
Yeah, they've had some goaltending, a bit of a carousel this year, so nice to get solidified there.
Okay, is it the most random email ever sent to a couple of podcast hosts ever? I don't know, but we'll let you be the judge of that. And of course, our prospect of the week still to come on this week's episode of the OHL podcast. One of the things that Dan and I love about this podcast is the opportunity to interact with you. Wherever you want to interact, hey, we're here for it. Again, tag us on X, Dan at his name, at Dan Mahar. I'm at Farwell_OHL. Leave comments wherever you want to leave them on our social media channels. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube. But email is terrific as well. And John sends the following to ohlpodcast@rogers.com. I hear the term unanswered goals used often and incorrectly, writes John. I think the term was originally used as a way to say a team added to their lead or broke a tie and their opponent didn't score any goals. For example, if the Leafs were leading the Bruins 4-2 at the end of the second, then scored 3 goals in the third period, those 3 goals were described as unanswered goals. These days, I've heard or read where the Bruins were leading 2-0, but the Leafs scored 3 unanswered goals to take the lead. That's incorrect, writes John. The Leafs actually answered 2 Bruins goals and then took the lead. I'm just venting over an overused and, in my opinion, old and unnecessary cliche. Why not just say the Leafs scored 3 goals in the third to win the game? Dan, I don't know if John just has too much time on his hands, but I'm sure for you, as a fan of the Montreal Canadiens, you don't want to hear anything about the Leafs even beating the Bruins, do you?
If you ask me who I least like, I don't know. That's a tough one.
Yeah, right? Bruins or Leafs?
Yeah.
I don't know how strongly you feel about the use of unanswered goals, Dan, but John, let me just tell you as nicely and as succinctly as I can, you're wrong on this. And I don't know why you're so fixated on it, because here's the thing. If the Bruins were leading 2-0 and the Leafs scored 3 unanswered goals to take the lead, that is correct. They didn't answer 2 Bruins goals. Well, they did answer 2 Bruins goals, but when we talk about unanswered goals, the team scoring the goals, if the other team scores, then it's answered. So if Boston, in John's example, is leading 2-0, they have scored 2 unanswered goals to get the 2-0 lead. But every time the Leafs score, it is a goal unanswered by the other team. So I think John just gets mixed up as, yes, they are answering the Bruins' original goals, but the Leafs' goals are unanswered. So, John, I just think about it. I go back to whatever things you weren't doing when you came up with this email and think about it again. The unanswered goals, I do believe, is actually correct. Every time you score, and if you win a game 1-0, you technically won the game on 1 unanswered goal. The answer has to come from the other team. So that's the best I can tell you on this. But I love the randomness, and I love the fact that you are so invested. You wanted to send us an email to ohlpodcast@rogers.com. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, and actually, John, I totally love the emails. And, and to some extent, I'll defend you here because my brain works the same way. I have the most random thoughts sometimes. I'm like, this bugs me. Why is it like... And you know what? It's all valid. I get it. A fellow person whose brain works a little randomly at times, I'm like, does anyone else care about this? Because it annoys me. But I will say, that's my interpretation too, Mike. And I think to defend the broadcasters, I have to say that you have to consider that these comments are a capsule in time too. So at the point in the game, they're saying it's an unanswered goal. It hadn't yet been answered. So if they just scored 3 goals in a row, those were 3 unanswered goals. Yeah, maybe the other team comes back and scores later. They eventually answer it. But yeah, it's tit for tat, right? You score, we score. You score, we score. You score, you score. Well, that was unanswered then. So anyway, I have the same interpretation as you, Mike. But I appreciate the email, John. I love the randomness and the thoughtfulness.
Well, and as Dan is so kind as to defend the broadcasters in this, as the broadcaster on this podcast, let me just say the royal we in broadcasting, could probably use a cliche or two less in our lives. And you're not wrong, John. We could just say the Leafs scored 3 in the third to win the game. Sometimes we might try too hard. And we came up with this unanswered goals thing, I don't know how long ago, and we just keep using it and using it and using it. And the horse has probably been beaten to death by now, but I don't think we're going to stop using it anytime soon, because actually, when you think about it, as Dan and I have just talked about, it is a correct usage of unanswered goals. But hey, we are here for the conversation, and we are here to say sports broadcasting is chock right full of cliches, no question about it. All right, Dan and I like to leave you every week with the OHL prospect or the NHL prospect that we think is getting has caught the most of our attention this past week. The NHL draft coming up in June. Which draft eligible player caught the most of your attention, Dan, this week as we look at our prospects of the week?
Yeah, I had a few on the radar, Mike, and none that were really leaping out from the pack, but one that did catch my eye was right winger Alex Hage in Niagara. And the reason he caught my eye, Mike, is he came with a little bit of buzz around his game, coming to the Ice Dogs, and he's got a gaining fame big brother and Michael Hage, who played for Team Canada at the World Juniors and is now at Michigan and lighting it up and looks like he's a top end NHL prospect. So kind of in that shadow. Alex Hage has not been as productive early in the year as some may have thought, but 4 points in his last 5 games. And what really caught my eye in those games is +6. So he's having a very positive influence on that Ice Dogs lineup, which is getting some wins of late. So Alex Hage is my prospect of the week.
I think my prospect of the week, Dan, is going to be unpopular for a couple of reasons. One is flat out bias, and I'll admit it. 2 is not everybody loves this side of the game that I'm about to talk about, and I'll go back to reference the 2 Gordie Howe hat tricks that you made reference of in the wraparound earlier. I'm here for the physical side of the game. I really think the Ontario Hockey League, and I know we talked about this at some length last season, Dan, I think it's time to reevaluate the 3 fight limit. I really do. I just don't think 3 is enough. We could, anyway, that's probably a story or a conversation for another day, but I'm here for it. So if you clutch your pearls a little bit too much, I apologize for focusing strictly on somebody who did something with their fists this week that I think should get them noticed, and I think it's for a good reason. So I'm giving my prospect of the week to Weston Cameron of the Kitchener Rangers. So yes, my bias because I cover the team, and I'm going to tell you right now, I made this decision when I watched his game versus Sarnia on Tuesday night. Nobody else was in contention for me because I wanted to focus on this guy who, for some reason, was overlooked in the most recent NHL Central Scouting rankings when it came to OHL skaters. And I'm not sure really why that would be the case. Forget the 12 points in 28 games. Forget the tools, which are raw but absolutely there. But here was a kid that came out and took on an overager. And I know Ben Pickle of the Sarnia Sting is not exactly a heavyweight, but Ben Pickle of the Sarnia Sting went after Rangers goaltender Jason Schaubel, and Weston Cameron told his goaltender, I want this guy, and I'm going to make amends for what he did to you, and came out in the next period and laid an absolute whooping on Ben Pickle. Credit to Ben Pickle for accepting the fight and taking his medicine, but Weston Cameron, I just think that kind of teammate, add to that the raw tools that he's already shown us through this season, and Weston Cameron, if there was, and it was a one game in the league that night. No, that was the night also they played the Oshawa Kingston rescheduled game. Anyway, I can tell you from being at the Odd, that place was packed with scouts. If one of those scouts did not see something in Weston Cameron that they liked that night, then I don't think they should be scouting anymore. Just say that.
Well, and this is a first for the OHL podcast. Prospect of the week who was suspended for his final 2 games of the week. So
I told you, I made my decision watching Weston Cameron do what Weston Cameron did on Tuesday night. I'm like, that's just, for me, that's my kind of teammate. And he's got enough of the other things. I talked about those raw tools to make him, I'm not saying he's a first rounder, okay? But I think somebody, he would be a deserving 5th, 6th, 7th round guy just based on the kind of teammate that he is and the tools that he's got.
100%. I'd actually be a little surprised if he falls quite that far. But yeah, he's got a lot of tools. And another draft eligible in that melee, Jason Schabel, just in case you're listening, I don't know what you did to escape a penalty on that play, but whatever you did, keep doing it.
You're not saying he bribed an official, did he?
I don't know if he did the who me and just got out of the pile, but I saw 2 or 3 infractions that probably should have landed him some penalty minutes. Maybe he wanted penalty minutes on his ledger, but he didn't get them there. He probably got off a little lucky, I'm just saying.
You just made me think. I'm pretty sure that was the game because I know I saw him a couple of times in the past week. Jesse Wilmot. I think that was the game he was working. I'll bring him up, not to say he made a mistake on not giving Schabel penalty minutes, although I agree Schabel probably should have got some. But Jesse Wilmot worked his final game as an OHL ref this past weekend. So the retirements are coming fast and furious, Dan. Ryan Hutchison was done earlier this year. And I mean, I don't know. We're going to be getting used to a whole new crop of people out there wearing the orange armbands in the OHL. So kudos to Jesse Wilmot on more than 400 games and a nice OHL refereeing career.
Yeah, kudos, Jesse. It's quite a thing. And yeah, you did a great job in that game. Sometimes the guys with the blockers and the trappers get off undetected. That's all.
They do. Goalies. They get away with so much, right? You don't go near the crease. Protect. And apparently in some cases, you can drop your trapper and your glove and get mixed up with something and escape with 0 penalty minutes. It's good to be a goalie, I guess.
Yep. Sometimes they light the match, throw it in the building, and stand back watching the fire department do their work.
That man over there is Dan Mahar. He's on X at his name, Dan Mahar. I'm on X at Farwell_OHL. You get new episodes of this podcast each and every Tuesday, but keep interacting with us in between and send emails anytime to ohlpodcast@rogers.com. We'll be back next Tuesday.